this is a little bit of a correction before you start this video. Throughout it, I keep calling it the Alpha 4. It's actually the Alpha 6, which I assume is for the 60th anniversary of Estes, which is when this model came out in 2018. Now go on to the rest of the video. Hello everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Alpha 4 model rocket from Estes. Now this was a limited production run, and I happened to gain several of these when an acquaintance of mine decided he was going to get out of model rocketry, and he just sold me all his stuff. As far as I can tell, structurally this is very similar to the Alpha 3, which is still in production. Like the Alpha 3, this does not require any painting or finishing, although if you really wanted to, you could. So we'll just go ahead and find all our parts here. Right, now if you've built the Alpha 3, this is probably going to go together very similarly, although the parts here look just slightly different. Alright, so starting back here, we've got our fin assembly in nice chrome red, and up at the other end the nose cone. And then all of our other parts should be in this little package. Alright, so we've got our engine mount tube. This is a sleeve that will go over the tube and help keep the engine hook in place. Speaking of which, there's our engine hook. Alright, and then we've got two centering rings, one of which is split, and that will be for passage of the engine clip. We have a launch lug, okay, elastic shock cord, parachute, and then a little screw eye that will go into the nose cone and attach the shock cord and parachute. And then we've got some self-adhesive 60th anniversary decals. Okay, it looks like everything is here. This does not have an engine block. Instead, it uses this end of the engine clip to act as an engine block. So if you're looking for an engine block, it does not have one. Alright, everything else appears to be here. Oh, here's our body tube. Forgot to mention it, although it fell out first. So I'm going to move all this aside, and then we will get started. Our first task is to assemble the engine mount. And so we'll take our tube here, as well as our rings and the engine clip. And the first thing we're going to do is mark, first of all, from the aft end. Now I'm going to write on here aft. I find a pencil or pen that works. Alright, so I'm just going to write it on the inside of the tube here so I don't turn this around later. Alright, so from the aft end we're going to measure first of all 1 inch or 25 millimeters. Okay, and then we're going to make another mark measuring from the aft end 5.7 centimeters or 2 1/4 inches. Oops, it's a stray mark there. So right about there. And at that upper mark, we are going to cut a little slot. Now I'm going to cut it next to it, otherwise I tend to overlap there when we put the clip in, and I want to be able to see that mark. Alright, so just enough there. That should be just wide enough, about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters, for this part of the clip to fit through. Alright, and this is why I moved it over just a little bit so I could still see my mark down here. Alright, and so now what it wants us to do is we're going to glue the split ring here right at the base of the tube, and so this will be able to still move there. And then we'll also put this sleeve on, and that's going to go over the clip there and down to that 1-inch part. Okay, so right now I haven't glued anything, we're just dry fitting everything to make sure it fits. Okay, so here you can use white glue or wood glue. Okay, whoop, come back here. So here I'm just going to apply, you can either apply it to the ring, actually they're showing applying it to the tube. We will go ahead and do it that way. But either is fine. Except I'm a little bit clogged up here yet. It's kind of a fancy glue bottle I purchased recently, and I haven't decided if I really like it or not. It's supposed to make it so you don't have to keep shaking your glue bottle down all the time. Okay, so this does not have to be really heavy. We don't want too much glue here. Okay, and I'm just going to smear that around to even it out. We don't really want it dripping here. It just takes longer to glue. It doesn't really improve much for us. Okay, and then with that straight, okay, then we'll just hold on to this. And I'm just going to hold this for about 60 seconds or so for it to set. And I'll come back and we'll put on the sleeve. A few minutes have passed and my glue has dried, at least enough to handle this. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the second ring of glue on for the other retention ring there. So we'll just, again, we don't need a lot on here. And you try to avoid getting glue on the metal itself. It's not a big deal if you get some on there because it's not going to stick very well. Now as I bring this down, I'm going to give it just a little bit of a twist back and forth. And that's just to help seat the glue better. And I'm just going to take my finger and just wipe off the excess glue there. Okay, and we can let that dry for now. Okay, now the fin assembly we can't do quite yet, so instead I'm going to skip down to the next part here. And so we're going to take our body tube, and just like I did with the engine mount, I'm going to write aft on the inside of one end, so that'll be the lower part. And now I'm going to take the launch lug. Here we go. And I'm going to glue this on. Now if you want, you can take a pencil and using a door frame, or in my case I've got, which is basically a portable door frame here, a tube marking guide. And what I'm going to do is just make a little light mark here about the same length as my launch lug, and I'll use that to help keep it straight. Okay, now that's, I don't know if you can see that, it's very faint, it's more of an indentation than a line. But that's really all you need. You don't want to permanently mark the tube. Now here I am going to use white glue so that it is more hidden. This is actually a white wood glue. Okay, and I'm actually going to put this on the launch lug first. I have to get used to this new bottle here. Okay, and here again we just want an even amount We don't want it dripping. All right, and I'm going to find my little line, just right there. I'll put that directly on. And now I'm going to sight down the tube here. Now that's actually really crooked. All right, so we want everything parallel. So the launch lug should be straight and parallel to the main body tube. And that looks pretty good there. So I'm going to set that aside to dry. Okay, now this still, well, that's pretty dry there. I think we can go ahead and do this next part. So now what we're going to do is first a test fit. Now you do want to make sure that this lower ring is dry and in place. Because if it's still sliding around, it'll make this step really difficult. Alright, so I'm going to test fit this. Now what we're going to do is the clip here should be in between two of the fins. And then this is going to fit so that that split ring is going to be flush. And then we've got about a ring's worth here sticking out. And so what we'll do is we're going to add some glue to this. And then we're going to put this ring on, let that dry, and then the body tube with the launch lug installed will go over this. Okay, so you want to make sure, so this, it may actually go up a little bit more than just flush, but there's a lip inside there. Okay, so that should go all the way up against that lip, and then this ring is going to go all the way down, and that's what's going to lock that motor mount into place. Okay, so take that, and here you can see that lip that I'm talking about in there. See if we can get better light on the subject. Okay, so that's what we want there. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back in. Again, I'm going to center my clip in between two of the fins. Oops, get out of there. And now, when I put the body tube on, my personal choice is to have my launch lug on the same side as this, as it tends to keep it out of the way when you're on the launch pad. Alright, so now I'm going to put on a ring of glue here. And again, this doesn't have to be dripping. Smooth that out. And the reflections off the red chrome there making my glue look pink. That's an optical illusion. Okay, now holding the bottom ring in place, we're going to put that over, push everything together there, and now I'm going to let that dry. While we're waiting for all the glue to dry on the motor mount and the launch lug, etc., I'm going to go ahead and assemble the nose cone and the parachute here. So there's a hole in this part of the nose cone, and that's what this part will screw into. Now to give it just a little added strength, you can put a little dab of either super glue or plastic model cement on here. So I'm going to use this brush on type that I can stick right down in there. This is just to give it a little extra holding power there. And then we're going to screw this in just until we can't see the threads anymore. So you want just a little sticking out, and you want it like that, so it's perpendicular to this edge here. Right, now you can take the parachute out. Be careful not to cut the parachute while you're opening the package. Now, if you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know that I don't like to tie parachutes directly onto nose cones. I prefer to use a snap swivel. Alright, but we'll kind of go through the motions here if you want to do just a direct tie on. And the reason I like doing it the other way is it just makes changing the parachutes easier, and at least hypothetically gives a little bit of strain relief to keep the parachute from twisting up so much. Alright, so what I'm doing is I'm holding all the loops of the shroud lines here on one finger, and then I've got the middle of the parachute here, and we're kind of adjusting things back and forth until we can get all of those points as close to being even as we can. So you may have to adjust where you're holding here, or adjust the relative length down here. Okay, now if you're going to do it direct, you're going to pinch down all those loops, pass them through, okay, and then you're going to open it back up again. You're going to pass the entire nose cone through, pull those loops down again, and then pull everything tight. Now I'm not going to do that because I don't like to. Right, so I'm going to put all my loops back through here. Well, that's cute. How did I manage that? Here we go. Now, if you do the direct method, and to prevent it doing from what I just did, so what I did is I was able to pull one of the shroud lines through that little opening in the screw eye. Once you get this pulled down and it ties itself onto a little knot there, put just a little bit of white glue or wood glue on that knot to hold it in place. Now what I'm going to do is use this snap swivel, and you can find this in the fishing areas of hardware department and sporting goods stores. It doesn't really matter what size it is for a rocket this lightweight, as long as the snap portion is large enough to go onto the nose cone without binding anything, and this is more than large enough. So we're going to start out again like we did if we were going to tie this on directly. So go ahead and gather up all of the shroud line loops onto one finger, okay, and then take the middle or middle-ish part here, and we're going to adjust everything once more until we get approximately the same size all the way around, like that. Okay, and then just as if we were going to put it on the nose cone, I'm going to gather down those loops and I'm going to put it through the swivel side of my snap swivel. Pull those loops through and open them up again. Oh, that one got away. Back on there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead, before I tie this down, is make sure that things haven't moved, because it felt like they did there. And so we can make some additional adjustments if we need to. Once you've got that, then we're going to pinch everything off. Wait a minute here. There we go. Alright, so we're going to pinch things here so they don't move. I'm going to pass the snap swivel through the loop, pull all those loops down, and pull that tight. Okay, one more check out here. That looks good. And if you've got that where you want it, then we can go ahead and again just place a little dot of wood glue or white glue on there. Oop, that's way more than I need. Little tiny amount. Okay, and then once that dries, you can simply open up the snap part here, connect it, close it back up again, and it's ready to go. And I'm going to take that back off until that glue dries. So at this point, we're going to wait a few minutes for all of the glue to dry. About half an hour has passed and all of our glue should be dry now. So we're going to come back up to this point and we're going to glue the fin assembly onto the body tube here. Now I'm going to do a dry fit first, And again, I prefer to have my launch lug on the same side as my engine clip. It's not required. Now there are some little, look like little bumps in here. We may have to trim that. And it looks like part of it's just the coating over the plastic fins has just thickened it just a little bit. Okay, so you can either do what I'm doing here and shave that off with a hobby knife, or you can use just a little bit of fine sandpaper. Alright, so we'll try this again. Yeah, it's a little off center here, so I think, yeah, we can just kind of move that around. There we go. Alright, so we're going to move, that's going to move over here. Now to do this next part, we want to put the glue in the tube, not on the ring here, so that any excess is forced up into the tube rather than down onto the nice shiny pretty plastic there. So here we're going to go ahead and just squeeze some more glue here. Now the idea is that the glue is going to adhere to that forward centering ring, not to the plastic. If for some reason it gets kind of wobbly in there, like maybe you didn't get this tight, then what I recommend is using some gel type super glue, which will bond to both. Okay, so we're just going to put that on. I'm going to twist that back and forth a little bit and then line it up. And you can see all my fingerprints on there. You can wipe those off later. Okay, so that's going to go like that. We'll let that dry. Our last structural part here is to put on the shock cord. So we need to come over here to the front of the page and cut out the shock cord mount. If you don't want to cut up your instructions, just make a photocopy of this and cut up the photocopy. Okay, now what this shows is that the shock cord here, we're going to lay that on here in some glue, and then you simply fold the 1 over onto the 2 there, fold the 2 onto the 3. Now I'm going to do this just a little bit differently, and you can do this in one of 2 ways. I always used to do this at an angle. Alright, and then fold the 1 over the 2, and then when I folded the 2 over the 3, this part of the shock cord laid down beside the other part instead of directly on top, which gave you more room in the body tube. It didn't stick into the body tube as much. And then a viewer told me about another trick we could use here. So you take some scissors and cut lengthwise. These are probably the world's worst scissors. It does take sharp scissors to do this. Alright, well basically what we're going to do is cut a fork in the elastic there. Now that's a bit uneven. You want preferably to have the same amount on each side. I'm just going to cut a little bit out of that. Clean that up. Okay, and so what we'll do here is we'll spread this on the 2 section, and then now when that gets folded up, the little forked areas go on either side. Okay, so you can use whatever method you're most comfortable with. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just run a bead of glue here. Well, I think sometimes these fancy bottles are more nuisance than they're worth. Alright, now for this you do want kind of an excess of glue. So now I'm going to put my shock cord on here, and the fork should be at the line that goes across the 2 and the 3, like that. Now I'm going to fold the 1 over the 2, keeping that fork split apart. Alright, we got glue coming up, and that's fine. We want to get this pretty much all covered in glue so that we make a glue sandwich with the shock cord stuck in it. Alright, now we're going to bring this up, and now our fork is going to go on either side of the main part of the shock cord there. And now I'm going to induce a curvature here so that the convex side is the side that you can see the shock cord. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to this. Alright, I'm going to smear that around again so we've got a nice evenly glued surface, and this is going to come in contact now with the inside of our body tube. And we want this to go down at least 1.5 inches into the body tube so that there's minimal chance of it interfering with the nose cone. Alright, so I'm just going to force that down. Deeper is better. If you've got long skinny fingers, it's really good to do this with. Alright, I'm going to press that against there, and now my hand, the left hand here on the back, is holding against the tube, and I'm pressing against the shock cord mount and the body tube with my finger inside there to get it as flat as possible. Okay, so now if we can get a little, I don't know if you can see in there or not, but you should be able to just see that there, and it's nice and flat. You want to avoid things kind of sticking out to the inside where the parachute or the shock cord could get caught on it. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and put everything together. Now that all our glue has dried, we can put the decals on. Now I'm doing mine before I assemble the nose and put the parachute back in and everything, just so it's not quite so much to worry about moving around. I do recommend that you wash your hands before doing this to help minimize fingerprints. Now we can use this as a guide, and it doesn't show everything. It's really only showing the main sticker there. There are actually 2 of those. Whether or not you want to use both of them, it's completely up to you. It'll fly without decals, so if you don't want any decals or you want your own decals, this is your rocket. Do it however you want to. Okay. At minimum, I'm going to put on at least one of these here. So these are self-adhesive. Now again, this is an older kit, if you can call 2018 old. And one thing that can happen is with these self-adhesive decals, they get to the point where the edges don't like to stick. Alright, so I'm going to kind of use that fin as a guide. Now I want to just lightly put this down to make sure it's reasonably straight, which it is not. So gently bring that back up. If you put this down and let it stick too much, it'll peel the finish up when you move it. Okay, so that's too far to the other side. So let's see if 3rd time's a charm here. Keep dropping it. So that looks pretty close. When you get it to where you want it, then just squeegee it down from the middle outward. Now I kind of lost track there. As I was saying, sometimes the edges of these will start peeling up again, especially as they age. If that happens, you can take just a very, very tiny amount of super glue, stick it under that edge, and just put it back down. And I found that works for most of them. Okay. Now if you wanted to put one on the other side, you can. I think I will put an Estes one on here, maybe 2. Alright, so maybe I'll put an Estes up here toward the top. Like that. maybe I'll put one down here on the fin. Okay, just however you want to do that. I think that's all I'll do for this one, at least for the moment. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and tie on the shock cord. So here, just put the shock cord through the screw eye that we put in earlier. And we're going to tie a double knot or 2 half hitches into this. Okay, and pull that from either side, both sides. And then on this free end, cut that back to about 1/4 inch or about 5 to 6 millimeters there. And that's just so it doesn't get caught between the shoulder of the nose cone and the body tube later on, which can prevent your parachute from ejecting. And then here I'm just going to put a little tiny dab of glue on there. Again, white or wood glue. You don't want to use super glue or plastic glue here. It'll ruin the shock cord. Okay, and then finally, we'll go ahead and clip on the parachute if you haven't tied it on. Alright, now to fold the parachute, whether you're doing it for storage or for launch, a lot of people don't like to store parachutes in their rockets, which is where the clip comes in handy. But if you are, however you're doing this, especially if you're doing it for launch, this is my new favorite method here. So what I'm going to do is line up the corners here so that in the middle I have 2 corners of the parachute there, and then I have 2 corners out here to the sides. Alright, so now what I'm going to do when I have those lined up is I'm going to take one of these sets of side corners, and I'm going to bring in that and put that over the middle ones so that we now have 4 corners lined up there. And then we'll take the other side and line their corners up there as well. So now we've got this kind of kite looking thing. Alright, now take all of your shroud lines, and about halfway down you're going to put these up in a loop like this. Alright, so you have just a little sticking out beyond there. I'm going to fold one side of the triangle over and then the other side, and that encloses all of the loops of the shock cord there. Okay, I'm going to take the vertex here and move it down, folding that in half. And then now I'm going to just fold in and kind of roll this together from the edges so we get a nice little cylinder here. Okay, and now we're going to push the shock cord down inside. Now, mine's been kind of beveled inward here. I'm going to take a thumbnail and see if I can fix that. I'm just going to bevel it back outward. It's fairly thin wall tubing there. Alright, now, it's all this staying in focus here. Alright, we can just stuff the shock cord down. Now, if you're prepping for launch, put 3 to 4 pieces of slightly wadded recovery wadding in there. Okay, now when we get to this point, I'm going to just slide that cylinder of parachute in and stick it down as far as I can. Okay, and then I can just put in the nose cone here. Alright, I'm going to take it and shake it upside down. It shouldn't come out, but it should come out relatively easily with just a little pull here, and it does. Okay, so that is the Alpha 4, which is basically a fancy looking Alpha 3. In all, this took about an hour and a half to build with all the glue drying and such. I hope you had a good time building this with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.